We'll try that one again. I'm going to go back over there, put on my lovely galoshes, my stylish coat, walk out of the room, come back in, and then we'll do it all over again. I'm back now. Good evening.
Good evening.
Ah, there you go. All right, so my name's Bernie Banks, and I have the privilege and honor of teaching here at your Northwestern University. And tonight, we're just going to have a conversation. So I know this is supposed to be about giving you tactical tips on how you can proceed as emerging leaders within your respective programs. But the interesting thing is, when it comes to this concept of accountability, the thing we know that is most difficult, folks, is not what others elect to do. It's what are the barriers that hold you back from doing that which you know needs to be done, but for some reason you hesitate in doing it. So when you think about accountability, what's top of mind for you? So, what about for you, big man? You gymnast? What do you do?
Football.
What?
Yeah.
You're too small for that, man.
Yeah.
You're a gymnast.
Showing up on time.
All right, so showing up on time. I mean, you got a busy life, and you know there's just a lot of demands on you. G-Eazy's calling, palsy. Everybody's asking for your advice. So, time management. All right, how about for you?
Giving it your best, like, every time.
So, embodying excellence every time. Okay, how about back here?
Staying, like, disciplined.
Discipline. Okay, what do you mean by discipline?
Like, going for film, like, talk to coaches, talk to your teammates.
All right, so following through on your commitments. All right. One of the interesting things, if you take a look at the work of Jim Collins. Jim Collins, anybody familiar with him? Good to Great? No one's heard of that? Well, you should. So Jim Collins is a very famous management author. And one of the things he talks about is that discipline is not only reflected in what we choose to do, it's also reflected in what we elect not to do. So while we have all these commitments, we also have a number of things that could occupy our time that we have to have the wherewithal to say, I elect not to do that. Whatever it is. Binge watch, sleep, eat something you're not supposed to eat, whatever it is. Look at it, she's like, binge watch. Strange Things 2 right now, what are you doing? What are you binge watching?
I don't really watch TV.
Yeah, no TV?
No.
Of any type? I mean, okay, are you eschew entertainment?
No, I'm a bachelor girl. I watch The Bachelor.
The Bachelor. You know, none of that shit is real. So, yeah, it's complete fantasy. But, yeah, if it's good for you, that's all right. Everybody needs a little escapism. Okay, great. How about over here? When you think about accountability, what's top of mind for you?
I actually agree with you. Like, it's that giving 100% every day and like bringing your best practice every day.
So who here has a coach that talks about the process? Everybody's got somebody talking about the process. It's a very sexy term these days, right? Process, that hard process. The process is all about giving excellence in every rep, right? Making sure that every little discrete activity is done to the best of your ability, so that by honoring the process over time, excellence is the result. So we understand the importance of having a process, we understand the importance of engaging in a process, but we have a lot of challenges many times honoring the process. Going back to questions around discipline, or time management, or a number of other things. All right? How about in the back? Top of mind for you, as it comes to this topic of accountability.
Having integrity.
Okay.
Like making sure to like be honest about what you're doing and like what there's like kind of hard work ethics, like not having them and stand true to your
How about over in the back, over there?
Also holding your teammates accountable.
So challenge of holding your teammates accountable. Hey, they're your friends. They're Northwestern athletes. You know, they're Chicago's Big Ten team. Aren't they going to do the right thing all the time? They're going to look at you and go, I got your back, you got mine. Together we're going to shine. Or sometimes they're like, please leave me alone. Which is it? Somewhere in between? All right. So, A lot of different things come to mind when we think about this topic of accountability. But every one of your coaches and every one of your teammates understands that accountability is important. So the first question you have to ask yourself is, one, do I understand what I need to hold others and myself accountable for? And two, what's holding me back? So let's do exercise number 1. I want you to just jot down, briefly, what am I actually accountable for? And why does it matter? What am I accountable for and why does it matter?
Thank you very much. Very appreciate it.
One more minute. All right, great. By now we should have a nice, coherent set of thoughts. So this part of the exercise. Does everybody here have somebody who's on their team with them? Or is anybody here isolated, like you're the only member of your team? Only member of your team? Only member, only member, only member, only member. Okay? So, if you have a teammate, pair up with a teammate, see how much commonality exists on your list. If you don't have a teammate, pair up with somebody who doesn't have one and see how much overlap exists on your list.
Sorry. Oh, no.
And then our class is what's our class? Like we're now we're all individuals trying to develop
Good job.
You don't have to localize it, but you back around. I got a ball in the street and I gotta chase it back. If it doesn't happen, it's probably the next ball. Extra time to
You walk by and it was really hard. And it was like, yeah.
Who's halfway serious?
All right, so has everybody gone through the exercise? You've shared your insights? Great, so for those of you who were teammates, how aligned were your respective lists?
We agreed on pretty much everything. We both talked about how we're, accountable for our own actions and how you can't lead if you're not doing things the right way yourself. And then we also talked about how, like, as older guys in our position groups, we're accountable for the actions of the younger guys and making sure that they're understanding, like, the playbook and getting a good sense for the program. And then we also talked about how we're accountable for, like, our whole class because we're all looking out for each other all the time.
All right, so what does that consist of? We're accountable for our class. So what does that mean?
So when someone isn't acting the way that they should, you have the right mind to say something to them and tell them how their actions are affecting people around them.
All right, and what constitutes an action that is not just? So they're not acting the way they should. What's the benchmark for that?
I don't think there's a definitive line, but I feel like if someone is repetitively doing things that others disagree with,
Well, give me an example.
Or going against, like, what our goals are as a team. An example would be like we have a policy where after losses we don't go out to parties or out with friends. And so if someone were to go out after a party, we have to.
All right, so that's an established practice.
Yeah.
Okay? So established practices, easy to understand. If we go back to, hey, just not acting the right way, once again, how do you hold somebody accountable for something unless they know what it is they're being held accountable for? Because if it's just about an attitude, difficult to actually enforce.
yeah, I mean, the smaller things I think that add up over time. So if we hold a film session, say, and it's not mandatory, you can't make people show up, but people make an effort like not to go almost, and they come up with a lame excuse every time. I think that's something where it's like, hey, you need to change the way that you're looking at this. We're trying to get better together. We're trying to reach this common goal. So, like, you're either with us or you're against us.
Okay? Some other teams. Soccer. You guys were completely aligned, except you had one additional thing. What was the additional thing? So personal action, something they highlight over there. So the example you set. Great. So complete alignment, a lot of overlap. Other teams.
we like had like 2 out of 3 of our points were like basically the same, but then she talked about communication and I talked about resilience. So like we both agreed with that once we like talked to each other, but we didn't come up with the other person's one.
All right. Anyone else? Where does this dialogue begin? Is it something you create on your own? Is it co-creation or some other process? What do you think? Is that a something Chuck question?
I think it's kind of been established in the program, and then the leaders that we've had in the past have just kind of developed this, and then we kind of follow through with it each year, but we fine tune it each year at the team meeting.
Okay. So part of it is conversations that transpire at the start of the year. Other ways in which this is passed down. Coaches, absolutely. So the reality is, if you enter into formal leadership roles inside your programs, you're emissaries of the coaching staff. And you have to understand that. First and foremost, your obligation is to fulfill the vision they have for their programs. Sometimes individuals enter into these formal roles and they make it about their vision, not that of their legitimate authority. So first and foremost, if you enter into these formal roles, your obligation is to help enact the vision, policy, standards of your coaching staff. If in fact the coaching staff augments their objectives with those of the team itself, great. But you have to understand, formal role, you're trying to enact their vision, standards, policies. Informal roles, you most certainly have influence over how others elect to behave, but if you are to use that informal authority well, you must ensure it is aligned with what the coaching staff and the formal leaders have elected to focus on. And that's why having clarity around what it is you are trying to enforce is important. You cannot leave it to chance. So if anybody here had lists that diverged significantly, the question would be, why? Was it a lack of effective communication? Was it a lack of understanding of what the coaching staff had set out? Or did you come up with your own personal set of ideas and you weren't thinking about, does this ladder up to achieving their intent? So clarity matters. It is hard to hold people accountable for something unless they know exactly what they're being held accountable for. And ultimately, this is all about how do you measure behavior, yours and the behavior of others. How do you measure behavior? And so the thing about holding people accountable is, one, am I clear on what it is we've committed to? Two, do I have the personal wherewithal to do that which is necessary to embody the standards and to enforce the standards? Which leads to the critical question. All of you highlighted difficult things, whether it's addressing the behavior of teammates, whether it's pushing self to do the right thing. And so the critical question is, what holds you back? What holds you back from doing the things that your program says are important? So whether it's, hey, we need to be on time, whether it's, hey, we need to all be on the same sheet of music, whatever it is. What holds you back? Because the interesting thing about accountability is rarely is it rooted in, I don't know what it is we're supposed to be holding others accountable. Usually it's, I know what we have to hold others accountable for, but there's something that's marginalizing my willingness to do it. So I want you to think about that. Take a few minutes, think about what's holding you back. Okay. So, have a few minutes to think about that question. Let's see, what are some of the things that you perceive as personal barriers? So who'd be willing to share one? Please.
Social pressure, not wanting to make anyone upset and everyone not like me, but they change their behavior.
Ah, so not wanting to receive negative social states. Okay, great. How about for you?
Division of lessons among teammates or within the team. Holding someone accountable, that person might not take what how they're able to receive criticism, and they perceive you as a teammate or someone trying to provide the team instead of bringing together.
All right, so potential going to the same thing, social pressure, blowback. Some others. How about over here?
Yeah, I just had the, I don't always think it's worth it, like the person will listen to you. Like maybe you tried telling them something before and they would just blew it off, so it's kind of like, what's the point now?
All right, so the juice isn't worth the squeeze. They're not going to listen anyway. All right? How about over here?
This is like maybe being hypocritical without even doing it. Like an example that pops in my head is like maybe you're at workouts and you're like giving it your all, and like you see someone else's form isn't great. You're like, oh hey, you're like maybe you need to like if you're playing group butts and about this and thing, and like maybe they turn around like, oh well, you were doing that too. But, like, no.
All right. Great. Any others? Please.
As an underclassman, like not being in a formal leadership role, like as team captain, I think definitely like be intimidating to try to hold your own team captains accountable.
Yeah. So I don't have legitimate authority. Any others?
I feel like difference of opinions with like the importance of the rules established. Like,
Ah, so is this rule even matter?
yeah.
Interesting. Any others?
I feel like going off that, like I don't necessarily always agree with what the coaches have to say. So I think sometimes like fully implementing your vision if it like goes against what a majority of the team believes.
That's an interesting one. Any others?
I also said difference of like priorities. Like the coaches may have a different priority than you with certain, like they have a certain rule.
All right. Great. So those are all great insights as to the barriers that you personally encounter when it comes to this topic of being accountable for self and for others. So let's unpack some of that. So let's start with formal authority. What does leadership mean to you? What's your personal definition of leadership? Anyway.
Having the power to influence change.
Ah, having the power to influence change. And so, where do you derive power from?
Either formal, like leadership roles that we're talking about, or experiences.
Okay, great. Other conceptions?
Being able to align the goals of other individuals to achieve a common goal.
Okay, so achieving alignment or to achieve common goal. Any other perspectives? So here's an interesting thing. In all of the studies that have been conducted around the topic of leadership, we've never come up with a common definition. And the reason is context. Context always matters. But we do know there are several common elements across all the definitions. Two or more people in pursuit of an objective that requires a process that leverages influence that's iterative in nature in order to achieve a desired outcome. Nowhere does it say must be in charge. Many folks fail to exercise the process of leadership because they believe they have to have formal authority in order to have power. But leadership is not about formal authority. It can be a tool that people leverage as part of that process, but leadership is all about one thing. What do you think it is?
answer that question again.
So if leadership's not about being in charge, if you were to distill it down to one thing, what is it about?
Motivating.
Okay, so over here we say it's all about motivating. What about here?
Respect.
Respect, okay.
Accountability.
Accountability. Any others? He's like, I like it. I got the in on that one. It has to be accountability. That's what we're talking about. Any other conceptions?
It's all about trust,
Trust. Trust most certainly can play a component of it.
influence.
There you go. That's it. Leadership. He's like, damn it. I had it. He let it out too. Leadership is about influence. There is no definition that says you must be in charge. And so as emerging leaders in your respective programs, the question is, how can I become more influential? And am I influencing in a way that will allow the program to be successful because I am acting in the best interest of those who have formal authority over it? So even if you don't agree with the perspective, you're obligated as a member of that program to seek to advance the objectives, aims, goals of the individuals who've been vested with formal authority over the program. Now you have a number of things you can do if you differ in your perspective to try to influence how they lay that out. But at the end of the day, your obligation is always to try to influence those around you to behave in a manner commensurate with the expectations of your formal leaders, which your instance are your coaching staff. And so, in order to become more influential, you must ask yourself, are my behaviors consistent with the program standards? And am I building the kind of relationships where individuals will elect to model my behavior? You highlighted trust. There's a thing called a trust equation. Anybody familiar with it? So, trust equation says trust consists of 4 components. Credibility plus reliability plus intimacy, all divided by self-interest. Credible. For whatever it is you're asking, do you know what you're talking about? Reliable. Do you deliver on the promises you make? Intimacy. Have you taken the time to get to know something about that individual? Divided by self-interest, which means are your interests aligned with those of your influence target? So which of the 4 things erodes trust the fastest? Think about it like numerator, denominator. So which one? Self-interest. Why would that be?
A lot of times if you make your goals different from the coach's goals, you're supposed to be in fulfilling their vision as a leader.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you want to build trust with those around you? Always think about those components. Are you taking the time to get to know people? Is your word your bond? Are you developing expertise in whatever it is that you're targeting? And are you doing things that align your interests with their interests? And if in fact any of those things is missing, you have an opportunity to increase the amount of trust present in a situation. But the coach will only accord you trust if the coach believes your interests are aligned with the coach's interests. The team will only afford you trust if they believe that what you're asking of them is aligned with their best interests. And so you want to learn, how can I create more trust, but also how can I generate more alignment? And so the hardest part about all of that is overcoming your own perceived barriers. You, not the standards, you are the most difficult person to influence, not someone else. Which leads to the next question. What do you want your legacy to be? Like if you had a chance to create your own personal brand, what would it be? And what would be the hallmarks of that brand? So what do you want your personal brand to be? because that brand will be your legacy. So what do you want it to be and why? What do you want it to consist of?
Like in life or like in Northwestern?
Northwestern is life. Yes. There is no at Northwestern, but I'm going to be a radically different person when I leave Northwestern. No, this is life. You got the fancy boots. Absolutely.